All righty, and welcome everybody. Today we've got Jason Olson from Turnz joining us. Um, I had a little thing prepared and lost it, so I'm just gonna turn things over to Jason. Jason, thank you so much for joining us. For those of you who don't know Jason, he's one of the premier artisan pen makers, and he's going to give us a little tour of his shop, talk about what makes artisan pens great and different from other pens, and then we're going to get to see some of his really beautiful designs. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to pin Jason's video here so that you see him and not me. All right, welcome, Jason.
Hey, thank you, Ken. I'd like to give a big shout out to you, Ann, and the rest of the team for keeping the show going in these interesting times. It's much appreciated from the maker standpoint.
Great, sure thing.
So first off, what makes a pen an artisan-made pen? You know, it's kind of a topic of discussion, and I don't want to dwell on it and ruffle anyone's feathers, so I'm going to tell you what it is to me. An artisan pen is where you make everything except the nib and possibly the converter if the pen uses one. So that means any kind of clip starts out as just sheet metal. We cut and grind and saw everything and mill. Cap bands, finials to start out as rod stock, and we machine and turn and thread everything, you know, by hand. And then also being the most base materials. It's just start with the least and come out with the most. So just to sum that up in a nutshell is we make everything here. Now, there are some things where you got to know your own limits, where maybe I can't do something, but we work with some other folks from time to time and do a little collaboration, a little trading, whatnot. But it's all about just keeping it made by hand. It's not some machine kicking out pen bodies that at the end of the day, someone starts to polish. Another thing that I like to do that I find a lot of, I guess, purpose and joy in is using alternate materials, Fordite, Ranchite, burls, mammoth, dyed woods, pretty much anything that you can find. I like to try and turn it. We'll see some examples of that as we go around the shop. Is there any questions about the artisan pen aspect? I'm not seeing any.
Just a quick question, Jason. What's ranchite? That's one I've never heard of.
Oh, ranchite. That's from the Cadillac Ranch in Amarillo, Texas. I did my Route 66 pens with that. It's basically dried spray paint that came off the cars stuck in the ground. And same thing with Surfite. That comes from surfboards. It's I don't know if it's acrylic or some plastic or fiberglass based material that drips off the top and it builds up on the floor. So that's where that's from. But the other thing that really gets me going is themes, stories, and historical moments or capturing events in time. So with that, I think we can start. I'll pick up the camera, flip it around, hopefully, and I guess I should have tried this out ahead of time. Oh, there it is. Just found it. Whew. Okay, so we're gonna go mobile. We're gonna go over and start over here. The way the shop is laid out is kind of like a big M or W, I guess, depending which way you look at it. You can just kind of imagine raw materials coming in here. This is a piece of spalted Cuban mahogany, bandsaw, table saw, really working more as a table right now with some pressure pots, and further processing. But a lot of the dirty stuff stays over here. And then we can move into one of the wood lays. This gets used for shaping, polishing, all sorts of stuff. This guy is just always in use. Uh, Another dedicated lathe, dedicated for buffing. So buffing station, you really can't go without a drill press. Don't use it a lot, but they're kind of invaluable when you need to. Little shaping, grinding. Well, this is actually just a woodworking tool, but I've had it for, man, 23 years. I've done repairs on it and whatnot. Cut a lot of the thicker Damascus kind of things here versus the handsaw. The jeweler saws just won't take the Damascus or real hard steel. This guy and all of these little wheels and things down here, this is really a polishing, sanding, light grinding machine. So every color and every wheel is a different grit or different surface. So you can make anything shiny or dull, smooth it out. And then this is a real fun corner. This is my casting station. I just set up a few different things. This is a box mold. Now I just have some woolly mammoth cutoffs in here. So something that's just a lot of pieces is going to go in a box mold. And then we'll pour the resin in here and then stuff that into a pressure pot. I also do one of my favorite things that kind of got me going was doing hybrid burl and resin with real cool colors. So that there we have everything in squares to hold the pieces of burl. And this is just one example. This is a little short guy, but this is vertical round casting. I also have some 12-inch versions of that, but then everything goes into the pressure pot there, or the two small ones we saw on the table saw doing its thing and holding being a table. Gonna just spin around just a little work spot. You'd be amazed at how fast flat surfaces go away. And everything here kind of flexes and moves. Everything's on wheels. Milling machine, I tell you, it doesn't get used every day, but this is a lifesaver. This opened a lot of doors. All my clips go through here to get the rings machined into the top. We do taking recesses out, even making the recess for the clip to come out of the pen. So very versatile. And then we can also do things horizontally here, but it's just set up right with the two main processes that I use a lot, mostly around clip making. And let me just move my chair. This is kind of the center of everything. This is kind of my main workhorse. This is big. It's it's longer than a toolbox. It's a 1127 lathe. Way overkill for pens, but I kind of have the belief that if it's oversized for what you're doing, it should last you a long time. So I spend a lot of time here. Wood, metal, plastic, anything can be turned here. And this, where I'm set up for today, you can see some notes and pens and my design book. And when I added that toolbox, I needed flat space because this would get clogged up in here with job boxes, which you can see are all pretty much empty at the moment. I just finished a bunch of things. So that gave me this area to work with. And just little things like this. That's a piece of rosewood made into just an organizer for, literally dental tools, markers, scribes, anything, just to keep it neat. So lots of stuff up there. The things on top are, I call them project boxes. So that's where I'll start. So you got one named Shuttle 2. That one doesn't have a name on it yet. Mutiny on the Bounty. I kind of just start collecting things, adding resins, clip parts, whatever. And then when it's time to start that project, you have a lot of the background work taken care of. And just, I tell you, I got a piece of about anything This is just all different burls, some silk oak. And then my favorite here is Chittenden burl. This is fabulous. It only grows in North Alabama. Kind of hard to come by, so I'm a little low. We're gonna just make the corner. We're on the last leg of the M now. This table was for light metal work, so we can do punching, stamping with the dies, small things. Vise is invaluable. You always got to get a hold of something. But this, again, is just all about flex. And this was just some metal I set out that you would see would get its rings punched out and turned into pen parts. And there's a little bit of a story. You see this spot is full of stuff. A good friend of mine sold his house and bought one 3 days later, and they were homeless for 3 days. They just got in last night, and this is what's left. But in there is my screw cutting machine. This is a more of a vintage lathe. This is a Atlas or Sears Craftsman commercial, 12 by 48. I think this will cut any screw, triple, double, single. So that's really what that's set up for. This is a big flex space. We call this mega bench. And here's one of the processes I had to move from the casting area just for the presentation today. All the wood materials and natural materials we use go through a process called stabilization. So basically all this stuff will get stacked into this big tube. That's 24 or 30 inches tall. And it has a cap. And then we have a vacuum pump that literally sucks all the air out of the wood. Now that does take a few days. And then it takes even longer after you turn off the vacuum for that wood to normalize back to the air pressure, that relevant air pressure. And that draws the liquid acrylic in, and it's heat activated. So after that has soaked, it gets baked. So this is all bog oak. This is from actually here in the States, from Iowa. I do have bog oak from Ireland, England, and maybe one other place, but this is from the States. Incoming packages, we got some really beautiful Tuya burl. This comes from Morocco. So you can see all the eyes and just the wonderful figure. And then this morning I was just working on some pairings, just what colors are going to look nice with this material. Tried the green. This has got a lot of colors in it: red, blue, purple, green, a solid blue. And then we'll see this color. This is purple and red. We'll see him in one of the pictures we're going to look at a little later. And then this just got here last week. This is horse chestnut that was planted by George Washington. So this is the kind of thing, when you see it, you better grab it because there isn't anymore. You just can't go online and buy this stuff. So I got a few pieces of that, and this will need to be stabilized because this weighs less than an ounce. I mean, there's just nothing there. I think this is from the 13th tree. He planted 13, one for each colony. And I believe this one died in, it's right there, 2004. So it's getting a little age to it just after the tree died. But anything can go on here. I'll set up my plating station for plating, gold, rose gold, rhodium, black rhodium. So big flex space. The nice stool you saw over there will all usually be sitting here. And we can move over here. This is the last leg at the bottom of the M. Jeweler's bench. Mine is not as cluttered as some because I guess I'm just not that skilled yet. But anyway, biggest thing here is the jeweler's block, being able to use that very fine saw to cut out designs and shapes. is absolutely necessary. Just some little scroll pieces I was experimenting with, and some sterling silver there. And all the drawers are full of hammers and cutters and whatever. But here's the latest addition to the shop, I would say. The engraving, hand engraving, Leica microscope from Germany on a flex arm. The ball vise that will hold all the things that you're going to want to engrave. Here's the actual machine. This one is a pulse graver. And one of the reasons I chose this tool is it does not require air. So it is very quiet. And this is a device just for sharpening the actual graver itself. And then here you do see we have air and an air pressure regulator. That's for my version of going to the dentist. You probably can't see that tiny little burr, but under magnification, this thing looks like a marker. It's, very detailed work. And then at the end of this has about 3 uses, this whole spot. So again, flex space. When we're engraving, sharpening the graver, got the couple jigs out for that. Then this can all go be put away. And this is also my hot work. I have a couple things back on the other bench that will come over here, do all the soldering and just, I guess, heat treating as well of Damascus and whatnot. And if we're not doing that, we'll come around to the other side. Got a few filing block, little file, and just more tiny little files than you can imagine. And I still need about 8 more to really kind of fill all the voids there. But that is pretty much the shop. We'll just take a gander back around. And we started way over there with the dirty stuff, main turning and screw cutting in the center. And I'll just walk around, try not to get you all dizzy, and flip the camera back around and we can look at some pictures. I do have to get my chair back though.
Hey, Jason, we got a few questions in chat. Mind if I throw
I
them in?
can't really see them. If you could just read them out, I'd be real happy, Ken.
Yeah, absolutely. So Anna asks, what's the most different material you use to make a pen body or nib?
I'm gonna have to stick with like a woolly mammoth. It's hard, especially the tooth, like the molars. It's an exceptionally hard material to work with. It can be brittle. It's hard to get a hole through it. To put, start making it into a pen, it has to be bored through. And this is just find the light side here. I guess this isn't working too good. I think we have this in the pictures, but this is woolly mammoth tusk that's been cast and stabilized. It's the actual piece altogether. It's not just, drops or scraps from someone else's work. But again, it's just the alternate things, relics. They aren't necessarily that difficult to turn. So I hope I got there. I guess one other thing is muskox. Not a lot of people have access to that. It has a beautiful creamy texture to it. And I didn't get any of that out for today. So what's the next question, Ken?
All righty. So Kristen asks, what is your favorite and least favorite part to work on when making a pen? And what's the most difficult aspect of creating a pen?
Well, kind of a generic answer. The least favorite is the part that you're the least practiced in. For me, boy, I don't think I have a least favorite because I enjoy everything. It is what you make out of it. There are some things I call kind of grunt work where you just gotta, bore holes all day into when you're taking something like this and you're boring out that inside, and there's 3 different sizes inside. That is just, I mean, it's literally mind numbing. It's just, that's all you do that day is just do one bit to here, one bit to here, one bit to the end. So everything gets smaller. It just takes a lot of time. A lot of folks can struggle with metalwork, but from the beginning, my first successful custom pen had a titanium clip. You just got to embrace it. You know, just make it your own. Learn, try something, even if it doesn't work, just try it. Challenges for me are learning to engrave. Actually started the whole engraving journey in 2019, and then Hurricane Irma hit our part of the state. Well, actually, I camped out on the Bahamas and then cruised on up past us. I have some elderly family here, and then it came out my wife wasn't feeling comfortable with me being gone for 8 days to go to schooling, and so that canceled the actual being taught. Went ahead and got all the equipment in the summer of 20. Put it on the mega bench, the big flex space where I had the woods and the stabilizer, and found out none of the heights were right. The table is too high, the scope wouldn't come down far enough. And then this winter, we usually do shop upgrades kind of over the holidays because it's cooler here and I can get in the attic to run new wire or whatever. We built that whole new engraving space. So it really got going with the actual hand engraving in January. So it's all about putting in the time, learning how to make transfers, the different gravers. Now I have been using the power carver for some time, just without the benefit of a microscope, and that has really upped that game. So I guess kind of it's the unknown things that kind of get me a little nervous at night. It's like, how does that material turn? Does it get hot? Does it melt? Is it going to crumble? That's the part that keeps you on your toes. It's not making caps. It's not making pen bodies. It's the unknown, I guess. So who's next, Ken?
All right. Kristen also asks, do you let anyone in your workshop? I wouldn't
Oh,
let
yeah.
anyone in ever. No one could touch anything. Your space is fantastic. It's a little fiefdom.
It is, but I do have folks over from time to time. Members of the Guild of Pen Artisan Guild have been here. A guy from Puerto Rico. If you're not around here, it's Tampa is hard to get other places from. To me, at least, because we're so far away from everything. But yeah, there's no secrets here because anyone that knows much about making pens knows everything I have here. So I'm not bashful.
Cool.
So
What's
Rick, next?
Yeah, Rick asks, on average, how many pens per day can you make?
Oh, it's not about days. I count by month. Because I'm working with a lot of odd things, and the back work that goes into it before we even get to making pens is just totally behind the scenes. I'm pretty happy if I can complete and ship 7 to 10 pens a month. It's you get into making Damascus again. I wish I had a background. Can't see the Damascus on here too well. This is milling. This isn't shaped. This needs to be cut and polished, soldered, and etched. So it all takes a fair amount of time because nothing comes in here ready to use. There's no pre-punched clips. It's the base materials.
All righty. This next one's not a question, but Anna wants to thank you for answering her question, and she says, "What a beautiful pen." I think she was talking about the mammoth tooth that you showed us. So.
Oh yeah, the mammoth tusk, and I gotta look at I have number 18. Ken is a finished picture of that. We'll get to that. There'll be one thing to learn about me. I'm more of a picture taker, not a good photographer. So, but we'll see one of these that was finished, that was made in parallel with this one. That's one thing with natural materials. You don't ever know exactly what it's going to look like inside. Your best guess, and you go from there. So I was making this for a customer, and I had to cut a block down. It's just the way it is. You start with the block of the stuff, and so I cut up 2, and just started 2 just in case one of them, was not good. I wouldn't be starting from scratch to meet her want date.
Alrighty. Rick asks, are you a one-man band or do you have any helpers?
Helpers. In the summer, my daughter will come out and help me with some things. She's pretty good with the mill. So we'll buckle down and make what I call a clip blank. It's basically cutting the sheet metal in copper, nickel, Damascus, titanium, bronze, and machining in the hidden ring of the clip, the part you don't see that's inside the pen. So that leaves the face of the clip open to any design. What she creates is really the part you don't see, but that takes a lot of time. That's a fairly precision part. She's got to measure with the calipers to keep it accurate. Occasionally my wife will help us do some casting when we just don't have enough hands, me and my daughter. She does help me with casting more than just the summertime, but I'm hopeful but doubtful she'll want to make pens after high school.
Alrighty. Mr. Paulerano is in the house, and he's requesting that you tell them about the Sands pen.
The Sands, yes. We have one of those in the just looking here. I'm pretty sure, yeah. Okay, the Sands, we got pictures of that coming up, but that's a fabulous piece of history. And you're gonna find there's a couple pieces in the pictures we're gonna talk about today that all go back to Howard Hughes and Hughes Aviation. But Howard Hughes owned the Sands. He died in the penthouse, early 80s, kind of off the top of my head. But the wood for the pens we did came from the stage floor of the Copa Room, which was the famous lounge where all the big names went. The Rat Pack, pretty much anyone you could think of back in the day crossed that stage. So there's a tremendous amount of history. And it was actually a little block about maybe 8 inches long. It was a plaque that was given to executives that at the Sands at the time they sold, and it got demolished. So it took a lot of phone calls, emails, searching, scouring to get that. And I have never seen or found another piece available. So we did hearts, diamonds, clubs. We did every suit, and then I did one for the guy that actually got me going down this path. It took about 13 months for him to get his pen. We did one just about the Sands. We got the $100 clay chips that actually got buried in the desert and are now being excavated and made beautiful displays that hold the pen, swizzle stick, and they have the suit that matches the pen inlaid into the pen stand, and then it had a pocket to hold the chip. And it was a pink clay, and I didn't do any cleaning on them. I do have one in my display case, but that was pretty fascinating. Just the back time to find the material, and then carry a little bit of the gaming background, but also just try and capture Vegas. So that was a real fun project.
Cool. Yeah, it sounds kind of cool. All right, we'll do one more question and then we can move on with some photos.
Okay.
And then we can do more questions afterwards. So Michelle wants to know, do you think you could make a pen using clear resin and dog hair?
I've had similar questions about like lint, um, other kinds of fibers. I would say it's possible, but I'd have to try it before I said so. Because just let me grab some here. This is micarta. We made this here. Now it's different than dog hair, sure, but this is just thin cotton fabric. And what makes this interesting is this was made by a company named Lindsay Woolsey. They made the fabric and the uniforms for the Revolutionary War and the Civil War, for the North at least. But this, they still make it today. And this is going to be a theme pen about the Revolutionary War. So this basically got put in the stabilizer after it was cut into strips and then compressed and then baked. So I'm always trying new things. The clear part, Alumilite, the resin I use, can be polished. It's maybe not the easiest to get a clear polish on the inside, but I'd say anything's possible, but I've had no experience with hair. Not saying it can't be done.
All righty. All right, you want to get to some pictures?
Sure.
All right, you want me to share?
Yeah, I have none of that on the phone here.
All righty.
So I put together a little collection of work to share with everybody. I just wanted to try and capture the essence of what I do. It's not just typical, cap converter, plastic bodies. It's the story, it's the meaning. That's what excites me, and I like to put that into my work. This first picture is from a series we did called Vision for Space. It's all about the Apollo 11, Saturn V, and the moon landing. Yes, this looks like a lot of resin pen, but that is a special black from the automotive industry called Black Betty. It is the darkest black that I have ever seen. And we actually used the reason for this picture. There's Kapton foil that flew around the moon and came back to Earth, embedded in the finials of each of these pens. I didn't quite know how many to do, but I got stuck on 11. Apollo 11, 11 pens. 10 were sold, 1 is for me. The next picture is the same pen, just in a different pose. So there's a detail. I went to work with that powder carver I showed you earlier and gave everything like an asteroid. I wanted a space, a well-worn but not destroyed feel. And the metal is all done in a brush, not polished, it's a brushed finish. And even the nibs in these were sandblasted. So it's a gold nib plated in rhodium and then sandblasted to bring the shine back down, just to tie that theme together. And then with the cap, my goal was, the body is the blackness of space. I wanted to transition from the blackest black to a pearl white. That turned out to be pretty challenging, and I have lots of rejects. Turned all the rods down and picked out the absolute best ones that gave that transition. And then a good friend of mine that is a mentor and also a good friend that we trade and barter work with, he engraved the clips on these for me because I didn't have any of that capability when we did this series. But it's the Kapton foil. I mean, I don't know, just for me holding that and then affixing it inside the finial, it's like, man, this went around the moon before I was born. It was the 50th anniversary, so it was pretty special. So we can go on. This was a pen I did for a contest with the Pen Artisan Guild. Do one every year. But the story here is about the Fibonacci curve, the golden rule, golden mean. There's many different names, but it's the arc, the ever-increasing arc that we see in about everything in nature. It's what's pleasing to the eye. It's what's strong. And I use makimeganya, which is a Japanese metal folding technique that's copper and nickel alloy hammered together. And what I really like about this metal is it came from an artisan maker up in Michigan. This man just makes the metal in the Japanese technique. The body is fiddleback koa. And that, we'll go on to the next picture. And I think it shows the arc and the, that I carved there. You can see the arc. That is a piece of the Fibonacci curve that is scribed into the pen in 3 places. It lines up with the cap band in 3 places. The clip is another piece of that curve. And then I did the same thing on the finial. So it carries that natural arc very well. And then we stippled the bottom just to give it some extra texture, I guess what I was thinking. And it's it gets harder and harder to make a progressively curved arc, and they got to end somewhere. And just to be blunt, the chances of them lining up absolutely perfect at the very bottom of the pen is about 0. I have one of these that does not line up, and I couldn't bring myself to throw it away because that is the finest curly koa I've ever had. So it's now a user for me. I use it. And there's no going back. There's no repair. There's no tricks. You know, what's the secret to the best carpenter? Those that can hide their mistakes. Well, here we start with a finished pen and then do a layout and then carve it by hand with the power carver. So where it is, it is. So we can move on, Ken. Oh, this has really been a favorite of mine. This is the first annual Labor Day pen, something that we're coming up on. The design is in my head. I need to put it on paper, but it's a celebration of the American worker. This one takes place in, let's back up. I think we've all seen the picture of men walking on girders, building buildings in New York or Chicago, no harnesses, no safety equipment. This pen starts in that time era where everything was made with rivets. The body is micarta, blue jean micarta. We made that here out of old blue jeans we got or bought from neighbors in our extended neighborhood. All the metal work is stainless steel. Again, just to carry that timeless strength and durability that we find in older products. And the rivets are actually hand-peened copper rivets. And then why is the section red? Well, that is a nod to the hundreds of thousands of women like Rosie the Riveter who supported the war effort. So that was a little kind of a nod to those folks. And we can go on to the next picture. Is the same. I don't know if it picks up the blue. This is a German ebonite. It's a dark blue with some light blue veining. And literally, unless you take it outside, you can't see it. The LED lights just wash the color out. I really like this. I did a few pictures with the hammer because that's a ball peen hammer, and it's actually one of the ones I used to start the peening process on the back side of the clip. Guess we can move on. I do about maybe 2 or 3 roller balls a year. It's not my favorite thing to do, but this was for a good friend and again, trade partner over in Lakeland. He makes fine cutlery. He makes knives and all that too, but he's really focused on the chef life, the fine cutting instruments for the professional user. But I think this is from Irma. He got smacked harder than we did, and this tree came down in his yard. So he just gave me the piece of wood and said, make me a pen. Well, I can't just make a pen out of wood because it had to have a little more personal connection to him. So we hand drew his company's logo, which is a doghouse forge. And then I made the clip in the shape of one of his knife models. So we can go to the next picture. It's live oak, which is typically, not real interesting. And it'll spalt and stay good for about 3 weeks, and then it will just totally rot. Just a little more detail of the doghouse on the finial and a little texturing on the actual roller ball point. But he was thrilled, and what I didn't. No, that was a different pen. That was all in that one. So we can go on. Here's the sands. This one, let's see, that looks like spades to me. So we added black to the red. It's called real red. It again comes from the automotive industry, and just trickled in a little black while we were pouring it. Added the black section, and there's that pink clay chip from the casino. And, how dare I forget? If you're wondering why the clip is shaped like it is, it doesn't really have any symbolism in gaming or Vegas. That is a original 1950s silver. It's silverware. It wasn't stamped 925, but the way it worked and bent and soldered, it was not some weird alloy. So that was actually 2 tines from the fork, cut off, shaped and bent, and then silversmith together on the end. So that was really a lot of fun to find, original things from when the casino opened. So we can go on. This pen is really just about the material. Spalted mango from spalted and figured, I guess. There's some figure in there besides just spalting. But this piece came from Hawaii. You can see where the wood was missing after being stabilized. We cast it in resin. And I have a few customers that really like tropical things, and especially from Hawaii. Just mixed it with bronze, really wanted to make a statement. And we can go to the next picture. I mean, see the cap band a little better. There's a lot of metal on these. It's not super heavy because it's thin. It's just the height. And with any natural material, you can see they're not at all similar. One has more blue or it's in different spots. But they were a lot of fun. I actually had the customer ship me the block that they had collected, and we went to work with that. But the bronze will take on a nice patina as it ages, and then the oils in your hand will kind of keep it at a nice look if you're using it. If it sits for a long time, it will tarnish or turn, and you just wipe that off with a silver cloth. So we can go on. This is the second annual. I'm finding little things I like to keep doing. This is Franken Pen 2.0 for the second year. This comes out late September, early October. It really started out about making a pen or two from scraps, leftovers, mistakes, mispairings, but it's kind of gotten a little more to like the Frankenstein. I guess that is Frankenstein, but just it's growing a little bit, and I'll be doing a third series this fall. But all this stuff except for the metal was left over. With the clip that you can't see is engraved with a cut and then like stitches holding it together with some blood dripping out of it that's colored red. The bottom of the body has a lower finial. I think that has a circle. That's exactly opposite of this, where we textured in the shape. The bottom has a polished circle and the rest is textured out. But what makes this kind of fun is the part that makes up the pen body is actually leftover resin that gets dumped into a pour cup, and it just builds up over time. So there is no way to ever make that pen again. And where you see it's clear and it's green, that's actually clear resin. There's a liner going through all that. So this can be used as an ED. The liner is the strength. The outer resin is just for decoration. And we mixed up the metals too. We used copper, nickel, mocha megania. I think that's it on this one. Just try a mismatched kind of thing. And this one glows, so it made it a little extra cool. So we can, everybody's favorite donkey. We named this Doubtful Donkey. Some familiar colors there. I kind of have a little bit of a series over time touching on childhood memories. This one's about the donkey. The fun thing here, besides the colors, we put some texturing on the lower finial, which is black ebonite, to feel like the tail. And then I carved into the upper finial in the buff color, the face of a donkey, the nose and the mouth. But my favorite part was making these clips. This was a little bit of a learning experience of actually screwing two parts together, because that favorite donkey has a nail holding his tail on. And I was not gonna skip that detail. And it took me a while to figure out how to do it, but that is actually a tiny little stainless steel screw holding the bow tie onto the clip, and then sanded real low. And then I took my carver and carved out the center, so it looked like a nail head. And then we added texturing to the end of the tail, so it's like the fluff you'd see on a cow tail or something. We can move on there. Okay, so back to Howard Hughes and Hughes Aviation. He built largest flying aircraft ever, called the Hercules H4, and the news media at the time nicknamed it the Spruce Goose because they thought it was a waste of taxpayers' money in wartime America. But it did fly in 1947. It's the only time it flew. This particular wood, I guess we should address the Spruce Goose part. The plane is not made out of spruce trees. It's actually made out of laminated birch. Very, very fine layers. So just to keep it simple, we'll call it birch plywood, but extremely high quality. This was on the plane when it made that flight in 1947, and then it sat in a climate controlled hangar until Howard Hughes' death. And then it kind of bounced around, but then it ended up in the Evergreen Aviation Museum up in Oregon. And when they took the plane apart and then put it all together, the parts that I was able to get a hold of, I don't know if they were left over or replaced or what, but they came off the plane. And we carried the theme through. The Spruce Goose was actually painted with a gray paint, and then the nib and then the cap band, which is kind of hard to see here, are like a spruce green, but I mixed in a little bit of gray to carry like a mixture of the two together. And then we made the clips out of stainless steel, and they have been done with Cerakote, which is like a better version of powder coat. And I didn't do that. I have a vendor up in Atlanta that will do these kinds of things for us from time to time. I have no need to become a powder coater. It's just not what I do. But the story there is fantastic. And what you really can't see unless we do a video of my piece of the pen, the chatoyance, the change in colors when you roll this through sunlight, it is just amazing. And that's not some gloss painted on. That is sanded and polished with oils and wax. So it's just absolutely smooth and feels great in the hand. So let's see. I lost my spot count. Okay, deconstructed. I wanted to try and turn a pen inside out. One thing about all my pens, you can use them as an eyedropper. Just add some silicone grease. So we talked about the hybrids over there. I wanted to do it without doing the hybrid. So this is a live edge piece of burl. So what you see at the bottom is the actual edge of the burl. And I drill and bore out the center and slide my liner through and then glue it on. So this has been fairly popular. I've done just a handful of them, but it's just it's just totally different, and gave it the name Deconstructed because it's almost a pen. It just has like an earthy feel. Okay, so back to talking about the woolly mammoths. Did a short series. This one is called Mocha Mammoth. Used the number 8 gold nib, SEM German ebonite, and then all Damascus American made Damascus that we machined and cut here and did all the etching. And this is the tusk that's been stabilized and cast, because as the tusk breaks down, there's layers. They will separate, and it's just the way it is. So that's where the black comes from. But also some pieces collect tannins and colors from whatever kind of soil they were in. They take on that, because if the pure ivory is just white. And I've worked with that too. But this was the kind of the, what do you want to say it? The idea that kicked off pen we'll look at 2 from now, called Red Mammoth, that I was holding up. So we can move on one, Ken. Okay, so still on the woolly mammoth kick here. This is woolly mammoth molar. This is a piece of tooth. It had a little die added to the tooth material, and then the voids cast. But the rings that you see, or the half moons, that's a natural effect in the tooth. And again, I mean, these things can vary from, a light buff color to this one being, fairly white with the blue accents. So they're always something different. I poured the resin, textured the clip, and then we went ahead and trying to remember this one. I should remember this better. The tusk shape in the textured clip is plated in gold. So that makes it stand out a little more and is an extra contrast against the nickel and the blue. And that same texturing was added to the finial with a couple steps. Okay. The next pen is called Red Mammoth, and that's the one I tried to show via the camera here without too much success. And this pen will not photograph in a light box. You either catch the mammoth part or you catch the red. So yeah, those are my hands and we're outside. I like to use a green background because it makes other colors pop out better. This is just phenomenal. An 8 swirl German ebonite, all the Damascus work, and this one too used a number 8 gold nib. This really phenomenal in the mammoth. All those caramel colors, and you can see the natural texture. Just a great piece. I was quite pleased with it. I think we can go on to the pearl. I don't know how old everybody is. This was a little before my time, but there was a movie in 1961 called Mutiny on the Bounty. They actually built the ship, purpose-built the ship as a prop for that movie called The Bounty. It's not an HMS, it's not a USS, it's just a fully functioning sailing tall ship. And at the end of the movie, kind of spoiler alert, the captain burns the ship. But Marlon Brando thought the ship was just too pretty to have that fate at the end of the movie, so he would not participate in the movie if they burned it. So the studio relented. Marlon Brando went on to be in the movie, And the ship had a history of sailing around, educating people. In its later years, it was lived in the Northeast in the summer, and it anchored here in St. Petersburg in the winter. It went down as they were trying to come from the north down here in Hurricane Sandy. I think everybody except one person died. The captain went down with the ship. Oh no, it was two people died. The captain and then actually a descendant of one of the people that was actually British on the ship that was part of the mutiny. The rest were saved. So we got that from the captain's wife here in St. Pete. And I put a little spin on it to be the Pearl, everybody's favorite pirate in America anyway, in modern times. Dark. We did black rhodium on the metalwork. The wood is dyed. It's oak, Canadian oak. It's, looks like any old oak, but we add the black dye to give it, stick with the color theme, and then used an actual black pearl set into the finial. So it's a little bit of old movie history telling a modern story. And the mutiny, the bounty was actually used in, I think it was the 4th or 5th Pirates movie. It was the Edinburgh. It was a trading vessel. So it has a long list of movie credits to its name, but I'm happy to have some of this on hand. As I think I showed in the beginning, I have a project box started with mutiny on it. I want to do one just about the mutiny on the Bounty. The purpose for the trip was about breadfruit, cheap food to bring back to Europe to feed people. It's a fascinating story. There's a couple 3 different versions. Cost you like $3 to watch it on Prime. If you're inclined, I found it fascinating because I guess one of the things I enjoy about telling stories and history is I get to learn, it's like focused, really spot learning, but you learn about these things and it just, everything makes sense then. So the next pen is called GW13. Now we looked at some wood that just came in. This is that same horse chestnut from tree number 13. This one has has some spalting in it. This was a custom cast. I was going for the color of George Washington's frock coat, like the cape. So it's a dark blue with a little black streaks added into it. And that clip was cut over on the jeweler's bench with the handsaw. The detail is just, it's awesome, but it's really time consuming. It took a long time to make that. And then to think there and file it with 3 different grits of file and then sand and polish it while not knocking off a main feature. And then I just wanted to do something with the finial and just kept going round and round. And I settled on 13 for the 13 colonies because that's what the trees symbolized. And that seemed real fitting. A little bit away from George Washington himself, but the meaning of the trees. And the gray section was, again, I like to say a nod to, but a recognition of the lack of blue uniforms. Most American soldiers wore gray, olive drab, and a light buff color, almost like a natural cotton that hasn't been bleached. So I picked gray as to kind of bring that little detail forward that not everybody is running around in the fancy dress uniforms and great blue. But this was really fun to make and research that history. Oh, the other thing that makes this super cool is why is it that sword? George Washington was a sword collector from French, English. I don't know if he had any Spanish ones, but for sure English and French. This is a Cuttoe, Cuttoe sword. It was his first American-made sword, and you can Google that. It had ivory handles that were or grip bolster that was dyed green, had gold filigree, and it was made in Fishkill, New York, which is upstate New York. So that seemed the most fitting to me. The American trees, the American president, and then his American sword. So we can go forward into Route 66. Someone had asked about interesting, difficult materials. This stuff was tricky at best. This is in the bodies. It's kind of hard to see it because I use this picture, but I wanted to show all four of them. This is the ranchite that came off the Cadillacs at Amarillo. I had to cut it into strips, literally fix it to my inner body, and then recast it in a different kind of resin that was clear. So what made it real tricky is we have 4 different materials in that body that all take or will all tolerate different amounts of heat and different cutting techniques. And then the ranchite has dirt in it so it was hard. I'll just leave it at that. But wanted to capture that American spirit of when America found the road, Route 66. They traveled, the neon, the colors, the big arrow clips. I mean, that just screams that to me. And then what the tail is actually after a Cadillac, and I think Buick had them, but they're a little more muted on the Buick. The Dagmar bumpers, the big bullet bumpers. So we copied that, and just to carry that piece of the story forward. So we ended up with just 3 different cap colors. Everybody seemed to like the hot pink. It's actually red, but it looks more pink in pictures. And then we have salmon and then neon orange. So again, those clips all started from a big, thick piece of metal, cut down, milled, soldered together. So the challenge was the ranchite material. Next, we have carnival ox. This was something I poured this resin literally years ago and pulled it out of the molds, and it's just like, oh man, that looks like mud. It's like, that didn't turn out. I threw it in a drawer and redid it. I was just looking for something different one day, just kind of going through a stash of, all these drawers you saw in here are full of vintage stuff, things I make, ebonite, whatever. I got some of these out, and I turned them down to see what was inside. And I was like, oh my goodness, how could I have not turned them down a little bit to see what was in it? There's so many colors. This pen actually got 2 different sections. I just couldn't decide what color to put with it, because that light blue really, when you put the light blue section in, it really pulls that color out of the body. And then the natural material there is musk ox. That's a large, no, it's smaller than a buffalo, but it kind of looks like something from Star Wars. It has big curling horns, a ram plate on the top, and then shaggy hair or fur. I don't know what it is, but they live in Alaska. And I got this from I get this material from a native Alaskan. That's part of their income. They make lots of handicrafts and art themselves, and then things they can't use or have too much of, or they need some money quickly, as they sell, they will sell off different materials. And then did a Damascus clip that it's the juxtaposition of the materials that and the colors. I really like this one. That got sent overseas, and they should have it hopefully next week. And the last one we have to look at was a straight up commission. This was actually half of it. But it was a couple graduating from the University of Alabama. They both had degrees in classical music. This was his pen, deep purples, deep velvet. He embraced kind of what I like to do, kind of bold, not quite loud, but bold, natural elements. And then the Chittenden burl was a perfect fit. It only grows in northern Alabama. And the whole opera thing came up with using the lyre and engraving that into the finial. Her pen was kind of styled after a Lamy 2000 in a very, very light pink, but a subdued music note clip that I then played it with rose gold to tie into the nib, which was rose gold. But that's kind of the story on that one. And if you remember when we walked past the mega bench over there, there was like 3 of these rods sitting there I'm going to use with the Tuya burl. So that brings us to this year's St. Louis Pen Show edition. I named this one Forest Park, not just because that's the nickname for the ink, but I need a story. So once I found out it was green, the color of the ink this year was green, I got just to researching things in St. Louis. I learned a ton. Forest Park is an amazing place. I've never been. I've talked to 3 or 4 people that have been, and they're like, it's just fabulous. Just to put it in context, Forest Park is 3 or 4 times bigger than New York Central Park. And that just blew my mind. It's like, wow. I used, this was some mango from here in one county over at St. Pete. Mango grows here. It's spalted. So that's all the figure you see. Maybe in picture 2, Ken, there's a little more. Yeah, there we can see the variety of the spalting. Every pen is different. Every cap, I mean, they're all the same shape and they all measure out pretty much the same. The engraving in the clip is all the same. But the wood, every one is different, because what happens to create spalting, it's part of the natural decay process. So we get fungus like starting to attack the pulp of the wood, and they actually kind of have little wars and fight over what fungus is growing where. And I don't think there was any in these, but in some other woods, I've seen caramel, red, green, black, and it's just, it's a natural process that, we can't duplicate. Here's part of the picture and me issue. These pens show a lot of yellow. They're all a little different, but for some reason I picked up the yellows in here. But this is a limited edition of 12. I have some with ink and some without ink that come with the statement of ownership. You can see the front and the back, and I believe that is the art museum. And then on the back side, it will tell you all about the park, more details of what I started discussing, and then also what a fabulous color choice green was for this year's ink. But I'll leave that to those who get to read the card. So I have some of these left. They come with number 6 steel nibs, cartridge converter compatible, comes with the converter, and you can ED these. Just add a little silicone grease if you would, please. Even though they're wood, you can pour the ink in. So that brings us to question and answers. If anyone has any questions, I find that the most fascinating. I can talk all day about myself, but I'd like to know what you might be wondering about or want to know.
Well, I can start off with one that's in chat.
Okay.
Rick asks, without revealing any confidential information, where are you able to source such interesting materials?
Yeah, that's kind of a hard one to answer without getting into the first part of that question. You learn over time, it's relationships. As with any business, it's all relationships. And it's not just about who you know, it's about how you treat them and how they treat you. You get to know people and they turn you on to some other people. And it's just like not a network, but like an informal association. You get to know folks, and literally I'm looking for more Chittenden burl. So I talked to a wood wood, I call them wood guys, that deal in bulk, big burls and things, and that I trust immensely. And he's like, I don't have any. So he gave me the name of another guy. Well, unfortunately, the other guy gave me a great tour of his shop, but he won't return any messages about the wood I want. So he may not be part of the informal network. And then also just scouring, sometimes my family thinks I'm nuts, but it's like, I spend a lot of time just looking online, Googling odd topics and foreign over websites from overseas and Europe and whatnot. I should have added a picture to this. I have a very short series coming up, and then a bigger one. I have wreckage from a 1943 Spitfire that crashed. It was recovered in 1947. I think it was on the coast of France. I have the original, no, it's not the original. It's a photocopy of the original document that details it was the Spitfire Supermarine 6, what engine it had. It had the Merlin. There were so many versions of that engine, depending on where you were through the year. The Warriors, they doubled in horsepower from the start of the war to the end of the war. And I have a little bit of wood from a prop. So those will be like the super short run. And then I'm going to do some pens that just use the wreckage for a clip or embed it in the finial. But anyway, it's just relationships and searching.
All right. Kari doesn't have a question, but she says, it was fascinating to hear the stories behind each one of these beautiful pens. So I agree with that.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Otto asks, what material do you wish you could get your hands on?
Ha! That one I have an answer for. It's kind of an ongoing joke amongst some of my friends. It's like, yeah, just go ahead and send me some of that Noah's Ark, what you've been holding on to, or the Ark of the Covenant. Just things you'd never get a chance to own. But there's a lot of things through history. And I would love a piece of Noah's Ark. That'd be pretty cool. But realistically, I have actually, one thing I've been looking for rather diligently, and I keep coming up dry, is metal from a P-51 Mustang. I've done, some airplane, aviation stuff around World War II, and I just can't find the Mustang metals or parts, anything I could cut up or use. So that would definitely be on the list because I'm still looking.
All right.
And if anyone wants to see any of the wreckage from the Spitfire, I've printed up cards, and when we get that far, I'll show you the pictures now. Not right now, but if you reach out later, it's just the awesome history of it all.
Cool. All right. Jennifer asks, you mentioned your design notebook. How long do you work on a design idea before working any material?
Okay, I'm very thankful you asked that, Jennifer, because I have it sitting out here, and I have a design that only a few people have seen. It's a big, it was this A4 Lystrum. It's bound, so everything gets captured in here. What was the actual question, Ken? I lost my thought.
How long do you work on a design idea before working any material?
Oh, a lot of things rumble around out here. I talked about doing days of kind of grunt work, boring, not mentally stimulating, boring. And I'll noodle on something, and maybe I'll do a kind of a rough sketch before I put it in the book. This one took quite a while. It's about the Civil War. I have wood from the Gettysburg battlefield, and really dug into, it seems like everybody knows a little something about the Civil War, or why it happened, or what it wasn't. But I just wanted to get a look, not from the South and not from the North, but just like an overview. And I got into like the cannons. There was one cannon, it's an M1857 that made up 40% of all the light artillery from both sides. So that's the kind I get an idea. I may have to start with actually having something and then find a way to use it, in an appropriate way. I'm just going to hold this up because I think this will show. I haven't written the name on the top. It's going to be CW 16 Civil War and then 16 for Abraham Lincoln's presidency. So you can see the cannon that will be cut out like the George Washington sword. There'll be a star engraved into the top. That was obviously important to both sides and the flag. And then certain regiments use the star as their symbol. And I went ahead and kind of more for today, just took and roughed up. I always pour test rods. I shouldn't say always. When it's something really special, I'll pour test rods just to see how the color mix plays and if it's something if it strikes me as right. But this is the oak from Gettysburg, and then the resin is a blue, and then this really isn't picking up good. It's blue and gray, so it's both sides. Both sides lost a lot of people in Gettysburg. The South did lose more, but I went ahead and here, we'll just take this apart and a little lesson in pen making. So there's the piece of oak from Gettysburg. It has a big old hole through it. Now, why do I say every pen I make can be used as an eyedropper? Because the strength of my pens, everything has a liner inside. So this may have wood, but inside is all resin. This hasn't been glued together. This would be put together and glued, and then the rest of the diameter turned down. And I did mock up a cap too. There's the little finial. I think we can unscrew that. So anyway, just back to the question. Sometimes it takes a long time. I'm struggling with a couple right now. One is I have wood from the White House from when it was reconstructed from the War of 1812 when the British burned it. It just seems to me that has to be just right, not blingy. It needs to be respectful. I'm just having a hard time finding the right inspiration or the right vision. I know that sounds corny, but it's like it has to make sense to me, to really get into it. So what else do we have, Ken?
All right. Kristen says, I love how you recycle materials. Your pens are beautiful. Thank you for taking your time to do this today.
Oh, thank you. Talking about recycle, I recycle everything, nearly. To mix up epoxy glue, you always need a little piece of cardboard. That comes out of all the boxes that come in. I'll take the nice inner flaps, cut them all up into squares, and there's usually a stack like literally right there. Another thing, we talk about rare material. This is not an illegal substance. It is woolly mammoth ivory. This is non-fossilized. So when I turned and bored out that material, I put down paper towels and rags to capture and keep it clean. I'm going to try and cast this because I have never seen it for sale again. It's just fascinating. So I'm going to recycle my shavings and see if I can come up with something that's usable.
Cool. All right. And Brian asks, have you considered using a historical baseball bat?
Oh, yeah, if I can find one. What's your team, Brian?
And Brian, you can come off mute and answer that or put it in chat.
Either way, if you can find the material, I can turn it. I think bats are mostly made out of ash. At least I think the Louisville Sluggers are. We put that through the stabilizer. If it's old or new, it's going to get stabilized anyway. The Minnesota Twins. The old nemesis for my Brewers up there. You guys probably don't know this. I'm originally from Wisconsin. We've been down here for 16 years. So it's all about the Packers and the Brewers, not the local teams, except for hockey. The Lightning are awesome. We can talk about that later, Brian. You know where to find me. If we can find it, I can make it. Or if you want me to look for it, certainly can do that too. Add it to my search list.
All right. I think that's all the questions that we've had.
Okay.
Any other last questions anyone wants to sneak in before we wrap up? Dave says, thank you so much for your wonderful presentation. So lucky to have you as part of our show.
Oh, thank you. I saw something about Chicago. I'll respect the Bears because they're an old team in the NFL and the oldest rivalry with the Packers. So thank you, Rick. Now they're popping up. I can see little bits of them.
Cool.
But if you want to reach out to me after this, please hit the website www.write, like you're writing, WRITE, Turnz, TURNZ. Just hit contact us and that'll get you right to me quickly. So I do appreciate everybody taking time out of their day to listen to me go on. I'm very passionate about what I do and I could probably go on all afternoon. So that's why I tried to keep the pictures short.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Jason. This was really informative, and I've always loved your designs. You do some pretty amazing work, and it was great seeing all the behind the scenes stuff. Your workshop is amazing, and I love the stories behind your art. And thanks so much for sharing that with us. Really appreciate
it, Ken. Thank you very much.
You bet. And thank you to everybody for joining us. Our next session will be in about a little over an hour and a half with Paul Arano, and he's going to talk about starting and building a collection of fountain pens. So that'll be another great session.
Can I just add one thing, Ken?
Of course.
Paul is a very interesting man. He knows a lot about anything pen related, going back in history. Fascinating to talk to. Got to know him last fall, and we worked on something that will be coming out shortly. But if you have the time, wonderful guy to talk to. I'll just leave it at that.
Cool. Yeah, I'll be looking forward to seeing the collaboration.
Yeah. Yep. Soon.
All right. Well, thanks again, everybody. We'll see you in the next session. Take care.